Hello, everyone. All two or one of you who are listening. Kyle already hasn't. Kyle is not going to be able to join us. That's unfortunate because I think this is a movie he'll like. Thank you guys for joining us. We want to test our levels real quick. How do we sound? Do we sound okay? Is volume
Yeah.
okay? Amanda, talk to us
Can
for a
you
little
hear
bit.
me?
This
Can
is Amanda,
anyone?
everyone.
Hi. That's right. No one's like seen my face before.
No, you've just been a
Hello.
disembodied voice.
I'm real. I'm not a computer generated voice that Wes uses to disguise himself as a woman.
Yet. Once we get enough of your
Enough samples.
Yeah, enough samples of your voice. Oh, actually, Amanda, you're slightly loud, I guess.
Oh, okay.
But everyone else says we can hear you just fine. If you can you see the comments that are being written right now?
I can indeed.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure. Yeah, once we get enough samples of your voice, then we will be able to create an AI of you, and it'll just be me and a keyboard doing the podcast. So, I guess we could start then. Yeah, this is a special live stream. Us man says I thought Clay was BS the whole time. That's fair. We're doing a special live stream. We're taking the time on July. I didn't even realize. I completely forgot it was July 4th for us living in America. It's the founding of our country. I wanted to do that. We both watched a horror movie. Surprise, surprise.
Everyone's shocked.
That I had no intention of talking about. But it ended up being interesting enough that I wanted to jump on and chat about it a little bit because I think it's a new movie called Censor from a first-time director named Prano Bailey-Bond. It's an English
great
movie.
Name.
It is a very cool name. An English movie starring Irish actress Niamh Algar, who I didn't know. This is the first time I've ever seen her, but I guess she was in Raised by Wolves, that sci-fi show that was on last year.
Oh, okay.
And it's about it just came out. I was very disappointed because I wanted to see it in the theater, but it left the local theater the day after the day after it left was when I was planning to go see it, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of appropriate given the subject matter because I feel like what we're doing is right now is the modern equivalent of paying forward a movie that I found by happenstance that I liked, and now I'm handing it off to everybody else.
Yeah.
Because it takes place in the 80s in England, and the main character is a British film censor who is one of the people in charge of cutting all the nasty stuff out of the what were called video nasty movies, which were the horror movies that were too gory and too disgusting for anyone to watch. And so they were part of a list of, I think, 70 or 72 movies that were actually banned by the government and were actually illegal to own or sell. Which
I don't think I realized that list was so big.
Yeah, and there was no... the list was just titles. It wasn't like years or directors. So if there was like a romantic comedy that happened to share the same name as
of Don't Go in the Church.
Yeah, of Don't Go in the Church, then it didn't matter. Those would get pulled just to be safe.
Fun.
Yeah, there was about 70 or 72 of them, and stores actually were getting raided by police at a certain point. So it was a big kind of hysteria. It was sort of the English counterpoint to the 80s satanic panic that was happening in America. It's a period that I find very interesting over there and over here. I'm very fascinated by the satanic panic stuff and by the video nasty era. So this was right in the pocket, and it turned out to be this really interesting movie that was it's visually really great. It's very much like a slow burn, but the last 20 minutes are fantastic, and I would recommend it based on that alone. And yeah, it deals with a lot of really interesting stuff. The main character it's sort of a character study of the trailer. If you watch the trailer makes it seem like it's sort of a woman hunting down her missing sister story, but it kind of, what it really is kind of a character study
Yeah.
of a woman going insane. And the director's quote, kind of the inspiration for the movie, was, what happens, these censors are watching all of this stuff, all of these nasty movies. What happens if the nasty movies actually have the effect on the censor that they claim is they will have on the people at large? But anyway, I've talked for a long time. Yeah, Amanda, you hadn't seen or heard anything of this, right?
I think I had heard about it a little bit.
Yeah.
It kind of, I think, popped up on I don't know, a feed or a blog. Like the name wasn't totally foreign to me when you were like, hey, there's this movie out. I was kind of like somewhat, it was just like off in the like internet ether just enough that I had heard about it, but I hadn't known that it was like out yet. I hadn't known much of what it was about. I kind of had the same impression that you did, or that you said you got from the trailer, which is that it's like her hunting for her missing sister. And that seems to be like in the summaries and a lot of the marketing as maybe an easy way to try to sum up this movie without giving too much away. But no, I hadn't like seen it or anything before.
And it's I understand that marketing attempt, because like that's the hook, right? Like that's the this film censor sees a movie where she thinks her missing sister is part of the film, so now she's going to try and track her down. And I was really surprised that element of the movie doesn't happen till about an hour into the movie, and which is pretty late if you're going if that's
especially in a 90-minute movie.
Right. Yeah.
This is not like a 2 hour and 20-minute odyssey. It's like a really tight 90 minutes.
Yeah. Sorry, we're gonna probably spoil all this, so I apologize if you haven't seen it.
As usual.
But I was surprised, and it kind of caught me off guard until I was thinking about it afterwards, and I realized that that element of it is not the focus of the story. The story is this woman's sort of, like I said, it's a character study of this woman, kind of her descent into madness and whatnot. What were your thoughts? How did you feel about it? What were your thoughts?
I really liked it. Like I got into it pretty quick. Like it didn't take a lot for me to be like, because I feel like sometimes, especially with the more like indie movies that are trying to do something different, it can take a bit for you to sort of like figure out how you feel about it. Like,
right.
I had that problem with Hereditary when I first watched it, where I was like, I mean, this is beautifully done and the acting is great, but I don't know if I like this movie. And it took me a while and maybe like a watch or two to decide like, yes, I do like this movie. This one, I was pretty quickly just like, all right, I'm here for this. Visually, it's so interesting.
Yeah, it's got a great look. It's kind of it does the 80s thing without being too kitschy about it. Like it's more of a drab 80s, which I appreciate. It's very it's very English 80s, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I like that it didn't try to Disney-fy the 80s like a la Stranger Things. It wasn't just like, oh, like remember being a kid and how fun and nostalgic it was? It was also a little bit like, no, the 80s sucked.
Yeah, it's the 80s stuff that you remember when you really think about the 80s, which is like poorly lit basements and wall-to-wall carpeting.
Yeah, and, I feel like it's like the 80s that somebody who is older than us probably remembers more than like people our age who maybe have some vague memories of the 80s, or like myself have none.
Yeah. Yes. It was interesting because we were talking about this afterwards, and my first response was, oh, I found out that it was based on a short film. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. The end is really great, but the beginning, it feels like it's a little bit aimless. And the more I've thought about this movie, the more I really like it, because I've kind of moved away from that opinion, because once I thought about it more as a character study than as a woman trying to find her sister story, it comes together a lot more for me. And all of the visual tricks that they do and techniques that they use really bolster a really great performance by the actress. Actress who is,
she's amazing.
There's I only recognized one other actor from this, Michael Smiley. But it may as well just have been her the entire movie, because she's in pretty much every scene and everything is on her shoulders, and I think she just kills it. I think she's great.
Oh yeah, no, she's really fantastic. Like her, she also has like not to jump, like we always jump around and jump so far ahead. But when we were watching it, you'd made a comment about like this would be a great double feature with Starry Eyes.
Yes, yeah.
And she had that same quality that the lead actress in Starry Eyes has, that like physical quality where she sort of by the end does not even resemble herself anymore. Like she looks like a different character by the end. It's kind of astounding.
Yeah, and they have her hairdo is very tight and like a tight bun at all times.
Like old school librarian.
Yeah, but as she starts to lose it, like more and more of it starts like to hang in front of her face and stuff. There's so much attention to detail from that element, visually and sonically.
Yeah.
There's a great moment early on where they're kind of walking through the halls of the censor board. Excuse me. And it's just like part of the ambient noise is just like screams and like chainsaws and stuff.
Yeah.
And it kind of adds to the oppressive nature of what this job might be. When we were watching it, we were talking over Google Chat, and I said, I wonder, do they have like tours of duty for these censors? Like, do you do 2 weeks on Evil Dead or Torso or something, and then the next 2 weeks you get just cartoons or something? Because it must be even no matter where you fall on the should this stuff be censored, should it be cut out, or should it just be let loose to the public, watching that much of it every day, especially if it's not something you're particularly into, is going to be taxing in some way, at the very least.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of when I watched Breaking Bad. Like we binged episodes of the show sometimes, where it would be like a Sunday just lost to like episode after episode of Breaking Bad, and by the end of that, like you watch 3 or 4 of those episodes in a row, you're just like, well, everything's horrible. Like it does have a psychological effect on you, even if you enjoy it, even if you're like, I know this is good television, I know this is a fun movie, I know, like, even if you like it, which it doesn't seem like, what's her name? Enid, the character?
Yes.
It doesn't seem like she enjoys these movies. She's not a censor because she loves horror movies. She seems to take it as like a moral and ethical duty.
Yeah, she says, she has a line of dialogue. I forget what the lead into it is, but she says essentially what she has to do is get it right, because she basically sees herself as like the last line of defense between this awful stuff and the rest of the world seeing it and it affecting people.
Right. And so she's watching it not even from the point of view of a fan.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's more of a crusade for her.
Exactly. Which is kind of, I could imagine, even more psychologically taxing if you not only don't enjoy this material, but you also feel morally responsible for protecting everyone else in the world from it.
Right.
Like that's
pressure.
That's a really heavy burden on top of the fact of like, also something mysteriously happened to my sister when we were kids.
Yeah. And she's a good counterpoint, or I should say she's given a good counterpoint in the other people she works with, who all take their job different levels of serious. Like there's the one woman there who's kind of on the same page as her, but she's not as intense. And then there's the one guy there who's just like, I don't know, I think we should just let it go. It doesn't seem
he's like, whatever, it's fine. Eye gouging, everybody gouges eyes now and again.
Yeah, and then there's the other guy, the guy who asks her out on a date, who's sort of like sees the campiness of it a little bit more than definitely more than she does. But
yeah.
But yeah, the main thing in the story is that she has this element of her past where something happened to her and her sister that resulted in her sister's disappearance, and this is when they were kids. And as the movie goes, she starts seeing these things that are triggering these memories. It's clearly it's a blocked period of her mind that she wants to know what happened to her sister. She can't figure it out, and she starts seeing things in these movies, specifically movies by this director named Frederick
North.
North. I keep thinking Frederick March, but he's an actor from the 30s. He played Jekyll and Hyde in the 30s. That start triggering this sort of, mental break in her, because she's recognizing these scenes from what memory she does have, and then she sees an actress that looks like it could be a grown-up version of her sister, and that sort of sends her off. She goes to the filming of the latest Frederick North movie to find this woman, and at this point she's completely lost her mind. And it wasn't until I wish I could say that I was smart enough to have picked this up myself, but I was watching somebody else talk about this, and they pointed out the brilliance of the story and the title and the setting, because what she has actually done is she herself has cut out the violent part of her own story. She has self-censored her mind, and it's the search for that uncut material is what ends up driving her nuts, which
Right.
I think is that's just such a great layering of what the movie is, the name of the movie, the story. And they don't even really, they have one line where someone says to her, something to the effect of, "You'd be surprised what the human mind can edit out," basically. And it's sort of like the crux of the idea that it didn't even land with me the first time, and then I started thinking about it. I was like, man, oh god, it's the layering's great. The way that it ends up working out, I think it's just a really smart use of that concept and idea.
Yeah, and I like that they don't hammer you over the head with it. They're not super here is the symbolism, here is the theme, this is what we're talking about. And it kind of leaves it up to you as the viewer to extrapolate then if the censored material from Enid's past being missing is the thing that really drives her crazy, then what does that say about censoring this material out of these movies? Is it worse? Does it make it more tantalizing and make people more obsessed to try and find the uncut version? Does it make that kind of horrific material by making it more scarce, making it more desirable to find?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing that you hear all the time, right? When you see movies that get heavily edited down, everybody wants
the director's cut. Everybody wants the uncut version.
But on the other side, what you hear a lot is, oh, well, once they cut it, it was actually that much more gruesome because you're not seeing everything, so your mind is doing so. Famously, RoboCop has the scene where
not the movie I thought you were going to say.
Well, I'll use another example that's more on brand in a minute. Has the famous scene where Ed 209 just blasts the crap out of the guy in the boardroom, and the uncut version of it goes on to a comically long length, and it's meant to be comically over the top, but they cut it down so it's just gruesome and horrifying. And it's actually editing it down for the sake of trying to save people from a couple more squibs on this guy's chest. That makes it that much more effective and horrifying. Another example is, which we will actually be plug for the Patreon. We've been covering the Friday the 13th series. We just finished part 6. This month we'll be doing part 7, A New Beginning, I think it's called. If you want to follow us there, you can go to patreon.com/thepensky-file. Plug.
Good job.
Part 7 has the famous sleeping bag kill where Jason pulls somebody out of a tent in their sleeping bag and then whacks them against a tree. The original cut of that has him swing at the tree 3 or 4 times, which is just ridiculous. But the cut version is just a single swing, boom, dead. And it is rough. It is shocking. It's very jarring. It is much more effective as just the single swing than it would be with the 3 or 4 swings. So it's that sort of idea that I think is really, really clever about the cut version of her own story being the more harrowing version than if she knew exactly what was going on.
Yeah, and I really, again, spoiling everything. One of the things I really like about this movie is that they never show you like that whatever
Right,
happened to
right.
her sister when they were kids, whether
Yeah.
it was her fault, because like a big theme throughout the movie is that Enid is carrying a serious amount of guilt and a
Yes.
feeling of responsibility, even though she doesn't know herself what happened. Like, were they just playing in the woods and they got separated? Did something like there's kind of points in the movie where it starts to maybe seem like it's hinting that Enid did something to Nina. But I think because we're like so inside of Enid's like mind as it loses a grip on reality, you can very much argue that that's just her feelings of guilt, like
Right.
manifesting. And so yeah, I think it's really effective that this movie never there's never a moment where they show you for sure, or
Mm-hmm.
even really like it doesn't even really give you options very clearly of what might have
Right.
happened.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all really left up to your own imagination to
Yeah.
come up with like what may have occurred and what pieces of what Enid is experiencing now might be true, or is it all just made up? Like you're never told. You're completely left to your own devices.
Yeah. And what I think is really clever about the way they play all that out is as it goes, as the story goes, you know, as Enid starts seeing things she recognizes in these movies, and then you know, the first thing she recognizes is a scene of two girls in the woods that is reminiscent of her memory of the last time that she saw her sister. And then she sees the actress that looks like she thinks could be her sister, et cetera, et cetera. You know, the her thought process and the thought process of you watching the movie at that point is, oh, there's something connecting. There's something that she's going to find that's going to show that there's information in these movies that is correct about her, that's going to help her solve this problem. But at the end, you realize that it's all basically a coincidence. Like, it's all her interpretation. Everything she sees, there's nothing there that's
Right.
actually a secret to. It's not going to help Mulder find his sister. You know, it's all her own brain extrapolating this stuff. And when you watch it again with that in mind, it really kind of, you really get a good sense of how she's interpreting things, how the stuff that's being told to her is not as what's the word, foreboding or ominous as it seems the first time around.
Yeah.
For instance, when she finally gets to, she goes to the where they're filming the new Frederick North movie, because she wants to confront the director and find out what's going to happen. It's that quest to the movie set is set off by her interaction with the producer, who she has gone to try and figure out stuff about this actress. I think her name was Alice Lee, was the actress in the movie. And what the producer is telling her sounds very ominous. He's like, oh, well, she's reached the end of her shelf life. This is going to be the last movie for her, and then she's going to be done. You know, and the way Enid is, and I think the audience in the first viewing interprets that is much more sinister than a producer just talking very crassly about an actress that he sees as a commodity more than a person.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny because in that specific example, I very much read the kind of double meaning of like, yes, it could be this ominous thing like Enid's interpreting it, but my first thought was definitely just like, oh yeah, she's probably Alice Lee's been in a bunch of movies,
Right. Yeah.
and it's not as titillating for people to see her get terrorized anymore, and she's
Right.
probably getting older,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, once you're past the age of like 28, nobody wants to see you run around with your top off in the video nasties, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, But in terms of the things about like Enid interpreting everything more negatively and like the way her brain works, I think something that the movie does that really heightens that is like you had mentioned earlier, you're rarely, if ever, away from her.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
you're always seeing the world from her point of view. And from very, very early in the film, not only is there, you know, like you'd mentioned, they're walking through the censorship bureau or whatever you would call that building, and they can hear the screams and the like chainsaws from the other movies.
Mm-hmm.
Even when she's out in the world, when she's like walking down the street or there's the TV on in the background or the radio, it's always negative. Like it's always like violent crime, bad news, tragedy, international incidents and danger and like unrest. Like everything she hears that we then hear through her is like worst case scenario all the time. So I
Right.
think it
Right.
does that, like it sets up her kind of, I don't know if paranoia is the right word, but her like paranoia mixed with like catastrophizing from the very beginning, and then it just subtly keeps going up and up and up and like increasing in intensity as the movie increases in intensity.
Yeah, and I noticed I caught a bit of it the first time through, but I went back and I checked it because you know you don't always catch stuff as it's being thrown at you the first time. But she had been getting phone calls from people yelling at her about letting movies through because there's this subplot about a guy who had killed his family and then ate his wife's face. And the tabloids were claiming he did that because he watched a movie that Enid had let through the censor board where someone eats someone else's, their wife's face or something. And so she's getting hounded by the tabloids and whatnot. She's getting threatening phone calls. And the second scene of her getting a threatening phone call starts off as a threatening phone call, but then about the movie, but then the person who's yelling at her, it shifts into the dialogue that the producer had in the scene where she, spoilers, accidentally kills the producer. And it's like, it's stuff like that where it's like subtle enough that you might not catch it, but you do. It kind of stands out, and it's really adding to the layering of her being, you know, oppressed by this pressure and also it breaking her because of the sister stuff. I did want to ask you, I kind of felt the one thing that didn't totally work for me in this was the subplot about this guy who had killed people and eaten eaten his wife's face. And
they called him like the amnesia killer or something.
Yeah,
like that.
because he claimed that he didn't remember doing it, and that triggers Enid because she's like, how could he remember not doing it? And that's where the line comes from, where they're like, you'd be surprised what the human mind can edit out. But there's this element to it where she starts getting hounded by the tabloids, like I said. And I don't know. I didn't super think that really added a ton. Like there were people outside the censor office who were hounding her because somehow it came out that she was the person who passed the movie. When she goes, one of my favorite scenes, when she goes to the video store to buy or to rent one of the banned movies, and she uses her knowledge of the banned movies to convince this guy that she knows what she's talking about, that she's a fan. There's a tabloid person taking pictures of her that then get published. I don't know. That stuff, it's fine, but it didn't really. It seemed a little bit extraneous for me or superfluous.
I have a question back for you.
Sure.
Does anyone else in the movie ever acknowledge that most of that is even happening?
No, I guess that's a good point, because the only... Yeah, I guess nobody else gets hounded by photographers.
And there's another person who's named as responsible for it. It's her and a guy.
Right. And the guy doesn't give a shit.
Right. Well, my personal reading of it was that maybe she got a couple threatening phone calls. Maybe there was, you know, a time where a journalist was like, what do you have to say? Mm-hmm. But I think most of it's in her head.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's definitely possible. Yeah, the only other time where it kind of comes up is when she goes to the set and she's in the makeup trailer and she sees the newspaper with her picture on the front of it.
Yeah,
But
but at that point,
yeah,
she's
makeup
been seeing and
artist,
hearing all
right?
sorts of
Yeah,
stuff, and nobody else is like, "Oh God, you're the woman from the tabloid I was just
yeah.
reading that's sitting on my desk."
If that's the case, I like it more.
I mean, that was my reading.
Yeah,
I'm happy to hear arguments to the contrary, but that's kind of how I
I'll
saw it.
buy it. It works.
Yeah.
It makes the movie work better for me, so I'll take it.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's in there to show. I think that subplot is in there so that eventually you do realize that whatever has been happening around her, she has been exaggerating it in her head.
right.
That, like,
Yeah.
we're not seeing what's actually happening. I don't know if she maybe did get harassed to an extent, but it's not to this extent. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, because isn't it even revealed that that the guy who did that murder ends up saying he never even saw the movie,
Yes. Yeah. Hmm.
and then she still gets harassed after that.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll take it. But yeah, all of this leads up. I said we were spoiling the movie, but I am going to request that we hold some stuff back
Sure.
because I think the ending is
Oh, it's great.
the details of the ending are so much fun that I don't want to ruin it
Yeah.
because it makes the rest of the movie worth it. They really pull out all the stops. We can talk about it, but I don't want to get into specifics about it, about certain things you may or may not see. But they really visually throw everything at the wall. One of the really fun things in this is at a certain point, as her insanity reaches its heights, the aspect ratio very slowly starts to change and comes in and tightens from widescreen into the square video aspect ratio, which I think is really fun. But the ending is like it's a mix of David Lynch and David Cronenberg in a way that I'm surprised nobody's ever done before. Because like there's something in the ending that was such a David Cronenberg moment that I actually almost like got up and started like clapping because it's the kind of thing thing I feel like I'm missing from horror movies now, because it's like nobody does anything like really whacked out that makes you go, you gotta watch this movie.
Yeah.
And this has a scene where it's just a short like quick thing, but it was so weird.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing that makes me go, you got to watch the movie. It's pretty awesome. But,
right, and it kind of comes out of, I won't spoil it, but it does kind of come out of left field, like in a great way. Like there's no setup or like other thing quite like it. There's no explanation for it. There's barely even an acknowledgement of it. Like it just kind of the movie just kind of keeps going. Like it's at a point on the track at that point where it's just like collision is imminent and it's just everything's gonna come to a conclusion. But yeah, it's like it happens and then everybody just keeps going.
Yeah. But Enid ends up going to the set, and it's Frederick North is shooting a movie out by his house in the woods behind his house, because that's where you shoot these stuff. As someone who has done that, that's where you shoot these. And it's just got such a great like Fire Walk With Me vibe to it, where she shows up to this makeup trailer that's in the middle of the dark woods, and it's the lighting has got a little bit of that like glow to it, and the makeup artist comes out, and as you said, it looks like what's her name?
Audrey.
It looks like Audrey from Twin Peaks 10 years later, as when she got a job as a makeup artist.
Yep.
And
she's smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, she's got that kind
little
of
sweater,
David Lynch look.
the hair, the lipstick.
Yep. And she gets accident because communication isn't great on the set of a Video Nasty film, like, apparently. They assume that she's part of the movie, but
she doesn't really contradict them. She just kind of is like,
she says she's here for the movie, the Frederick North movie with Alice Lee. But it's played in such a way where, again, if you're watching it from Enid's point of view, it's this really kind of weird Lynchian, creepy vibe of like, we're waiting for you. You're in the movie. We have to get you made up. But the flip side is that no, they just don't know who the hell this actress is, and she just showed up. Half the crew isn't there, so they got to get the shot done. So they bring her in. I guess this is her. They put her in the makeup and they send her out. Which leads her to this scene with the director, which is this really dark, creepy, like, he's got the handheld camera in her face and he's screaming at her. And again, it feels very dark and abstract and dreamlike, but it's just a director being kind of a dickhead. You know,
right.
when you pull away the artifice of it.
Right. And the movie itself even kind of goes, like, lets you see that. Like, it lets you peek at these, like, little moments in this sequence behind the curtain where, like, the makeup artist at one point is talking to one of the other crew members and says, like, well, I mean, I don't know. The producer isn't showing up, which is weird. And we just got to get this shot. I'm tired. I just want to get, like, it's very much like, this is how these movies were made back then.
Oh,
like,
totally, yeah.
People were just coming in and out of these sets. And like, it was sort of these kind of fly by night productions where it wasn't very official. It wasn't very well run and organized. And yeah, the scene with the director was like, he kind of riles her up, and then when Enid gets upset, he's like, "Oh yeah, that's the energy. Let's use that. All right, come on, let's go." And it's like, "Oh."
Yeah. And then at the end, after all of the shit goes down, and she finally confronts him and says, "How did you find out about this story?" He's just meaning the stuff that she saw that triggered her own memories. He's like, "I just saw it in the paper." So, you know, it takes away all of that, like,
that there's some like conspiracy happening against her, and it really puts her paranoia into a real perspective for like the first time.
Yeah. But it doesn't feel unsatisfying, because at that point the pendulum has swung all the way across. So the original creepy stuff is being revealed as nothing more than just plain coincidence. But now we're so far deep into Enid's losing her mind that we're getting all of that crazy stuff now. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the lighting in this. The lighting is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
The cinematographer, whose name is Annika Summerson, started off as a lighting designer, and it really shows, because it's got that. Strangely enough, in the opening sequence, they show a montage of actual video nasty, like, you know, stuff from Driller Killer and a couple other movies, like gory scenes. But intercut are stuff that has been shot. I believe it was shot a lot of it was from the original short that this was based on. And you were asking me, is this all shot for the movie or is this original stuff? And I could actually tell what was shot for the movie and what was original, because they use a lot of colors that don't really show up in a lot of those movies. Like those purple lights and a lot of those heavy red lights. The red lights show up in like Italian stuff a lot. You've got that like Dario Argento vibe, but like the purple and blue is a very sort of like modern, quote unquote, throwback horror look that you'll get out of like Mandy or Color Out of Space.
That's exactly what it made me think of especially, I think, Color Out of Space.
Yeah. And it's a great look. I mean, it's a really, really cool look. And what makes this movie kind of stand out from those, to me, is that the lighting design and the cinematography isn't just leaning into that trend. Like, it's not just blasting you with those colors the way Mandy did. Like, Mandy made its name off of just blasting you with like thick, murky, deep colors.
Yeah, everything in that movie is designed to be like maximum over the top.
Right.
Yeah.
And Mandy has that, you know, the whole movie is about color. So the color is just really vibrant. And this one, they really pick and choose where they hit you with it, and they don't always use it in like high stress points. There's a great scene where it's not much of an actual scene, like it's not, but it's like a great looking scene where Enid kind of sneaks into where they keep all the films so she can crib Frederick North's address off of a film canister. And it's just this boring stock room in the basement, but they hit her with that red light at like just the perfect time to like light up the side of her face, and then they kind of hit you with all of it while she's taking notes on an address. Not exactly the most intense scene to hit you with a full blast of red light, but it's really well done. And when you get to the end, they really let loose with that stuff, and the color work is on the end is fantastic. They hit you with some camera effects that I won't ruin because they're really effective, I think. And the ending itself is very disturbing. It's not disturbing on like a gory level, but it's just like when you get to the end, you really finally realize the story that you've been watching. And it hits pretty hard. It hits pretty hard. It's a great ending.
Yeah, I liked, like I was saying earlier, I was kind of on board for this right away. And then the further we got into it, the more I liked it. There was like a little part in the middle that I felt like was a little mushy. You know what I mean? It was a lot of like going back and forth to the office kind of stuff.
Yeah. You know how much I hate unnecessary movement.
I know. But the ending is like, it's probably one of my favorite endings to a modern horror movie that I've seen in a really long time. And like, I think you and I have the same habit of sometimes when we watch something and we have criticisms, we rewrite the movie a little bit.
Sure.
We're like, well, why, if they had just done this, it would have been so much better if they had gone this direction or if they had ended it here. Like, I can't think of any alternative way that you could end this movie in a satisfying way that still kept the themes and the spirit and sort of like the direction it was going for. I just don't know how else you would do it. It's like a really great ending.
Yeah. And as you were saying, they don't give you the closure of you finding out exactly what happened to the sister, which I feel like could be very frustrating for a lot of people, but I thought was fantastic because that's not what the story's about. You know, it's like if the story's about the hunt for the sister, you have to have addressed that, but it's not. It's about what these memories are doing to her and how they're affecting her.
Yeah, and I think sort of it's a lesser movie would have given you like would have tried to kind of ply your attention with more hints at what might have happened and been like, ooh, you know, it would have become that sequence in like Deep Red where he's like going around like I have to go read this book and I have to go over here to this house and I have to go to here to this. Like I think it very easily could have slipped into that, but I'm really glad it didn't because like you said, in the end, that's not what the movie's actually about.
Yeah. And I had watched this big, long, not to go on too much of a tangent, but I had watched this big, long YouTube video about Twin Peaks, and it was someone who was very thoroughly breaking down Twin Peaks. And the one thing that I pulled out of it that I found really fascinating is the danger of catharsis as far as storytelling goes, because and closure and catharsis, the danger of those things, and danger's a heavy word, but because the minute that you give someone that closure, the story's over and then they can move on to the next one. And David Lynch famously never wanted to give the identity of the killer of Laura Palmer because he knew as soon as you found out who the killer was, the show would be dead. And that's more or less, I mean, depending on who you talk to, but generally that's what happened.
Right.
As soon as they gave you who killed Laura Palmer, the mystery's gone, the air is out of the balloon, and it's like, okay, let's move on to something else.
Yeah, we're stuck with these weird subplots about James hooking up with this lady.
Yeah. And Twin Peaks was meant to be a direct response to how TV had become very immediately stories that had immediate closure. So in an hour, you would see someone do something wrong, that person get caught, and you'd find out the end of the mystery, easily digestible, and move on. And Twin Peaks
episode of the week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Twin Peaks was meant to specifically hold back that closure and that catharsis and deny it from you. And the amazing thing is that he managed to do it twice. He managed to like reset the show when he finishes the third season, the most recent one, because the ending of you haven't finished it yet, right?
Not quite.
The ending of season 3 is just as weird and like
good
off-putting as the ending of season 2. Like he at the end of season 2, he reshuffles everything and it ends in a cliffhanger, knowing the show is not going to come back, which denies you the closure of knowing what the hell's going on. And he does the same thing in the third one, which is very effective. And I feel like this movie is kind of in that same vein where they are giving you the pieces that you need to complete the story. I don't find that this story is incomplete at all. I think it's very well told. But what they're doing is holding back that little piece that's going to let you close the case, so to speak, in your brain and move on to something else. Whereas, I've been thinking about this movie for 3 days since we watched it. And I'm really hoping it comes back to theater somewhere because I would love to see it in the theater.
Yeah.
Maybe the Brattle can get it. I'd love to see it at the Brattle.
That would be cool.
But yeah, it's a great. Do you have any final thought? I figured we've talked about it for long enough. Do you have any final thoughts on it?
I don't know. Like, I don't know if I can say anything more than what we've already said. It's a really fun watch. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I think it does give you a lot to kind of chew on, and also, like I said, it's only 90 minutes. It's not like a huge commitment.
Yeah, sure.
The acting is fantastic in it. I really think that what was her name? I'm going to make you say it again.
Neve Algar. I don't have a Neve Algar shirt yet. I'm sure hopefully like Fright Rags will make some Censor shirt, but I'm wearing my Becky Lynch shirt instead.
Nice. But yeah, like she's phenomenal in it, and like, yeah, there are definitely details and layers and things that can keep you engaged. And if you're not in the mood for something that thoughtful, it's also just really cool looking.
Yeah. I'm kind of glad I had to dig for this because, like I said, it kind of reminded me of the old days where like I read an article about it, and then I was like, oh, I'd really want to see that. I don't know when it's coming out. Oh, it's in theaters, but it's only playing at one time during the day.
One theater.
Okay, I'm gonna go see it. Shit, I just missed it, but it's on demand, so I rented it there. Hopefully, I'll get to see it in the theater at some point. But yeah. That's a big recommend from me. I don't know if you would agree with me. I assume you would.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think it just, like I said, around here it just left theaters. I don't know if it's out anywhere around in the States still. If it is, go see it in the theater. If not, it is available to rent right now. And I think it opens in theaters in the UK next month, maybe. So if you're a UK listener, go out and support it. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about it because I think, especially coming off of Quiet Place 2, which just horned its way into our list of the Rotten Tomatoes 200 best horror movies of all time.
You're so resentful of it.
I am, because like it's just it's like it's the problem with the algorithm is putting that movie on the list, which it should not be on the list.
Yeah.
And
no, that one was like a decent enough sequel to a good scary movie, but it wasn't. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And we had watched this, like I said, we weren't going to plan on talking about it. I had thought about waiting for my next wild card because if you listen to the show, every 5 episodes we do a wild card episode. Normally we're doing movies off of the Rotten Tomatoes 200 best movies of all time list. But that wouldn't have been for like horror movies. Yes, sorry. That wouldn't have been for like 10 weeks because we come out every other week. And I wanted to talk about it now. Just because it's new, it's kind of coming out. I think people should see it. I think people should support, indie horror where they can find it. So yeah, go out, watch it, rent it, check it out. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Amanda, for joining us on this live stream. I'd like to give a shout out to Kyle for the $5 or £5, excuse me, that he gave us. Kyle Barrett, Rotten Horror Picture Show co-creator. He came up with the name, so I have to give him credit.
Thank you, Kyle. I did not know that.
Yes. But yeah, if you want to follow us on Patreon, where we do Friday the 13th, that's patreon.com/The Penske File. Otherwise, we have our show that comes out every other week. This coming week, we have Audition, I believe, comes out this week.
Ooh.
And then after that, 2 weeks from now, will be Quiet Place Part 2, which is fine. It's fine. But my point is...
Tune in to watch Clay, or listen to Clay, be even more annoyed next time.
My point is, if it comes down to Quiet Place, if you're looking for a horror movie, and it comes down to Quiet Place Part 2 or Censor, I'm going to say watch Censor.
It's a better movie.
Yeah, I mean, Quiet Place Part 2 is like, you kind of know what you're getting. But if you're looking for a horror movie to watch, like a new horror movie, watch Censor. Tell us what you think of the ending, because it's awesome.
Yes.
But thank you guys. Thanks for spending your 4th of July with us. And hopefully where you are, it's not raining and you can go eat some hamburgers or veggie burgers or whatever you're into.
Light some shit on fire.
Yeah. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, Clay.
Thanks, guys. We will see you next time. Bye.